This is More Than 5%, a podcast dedicated to covering the stories of women in sports. Whatever the sport, whatever the role, everyone is welcome. Now, let's join our hosts, Zoe Hicks and Carly Jackson, for a weekly conversation with women who inspire.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to More Than 5%. I'm one of your hosts, Zoe Hicks, former Division I athlete, former professional softball player overseas. Currently, I work with the Los Angeles Dodgers in their minor league program. Today, I'm going to be rocking solo. Carly is not here. She is prepping for the playoffs in the PHF with her team, the Toronto Six. So wishing all the good vibes over there to them as they make their playoff push at the end of this season. Today, I do have Dan Rice on the pod to talk PHF. We're going to go into the details of what's happened this season and what to expect come playoff time. So, hi, Dan. Welcome to the pod.
How you doing?
Good, thanks. Okay, so Dan, he is the lead PHF writer for the Ice Garden. He's the host of Future Considerations Pod, as well as was the features writer for the NWHL 2016 to 2020. For those of you who don't know, NWHL is now the PHF. So naturally, Dan just followed the PHF. So today, we're going to talk PHF stuff, get into the nitty-gritty details, tell you what you need to know come big time playoff time. As we start every episode, we're going to do a little bit of good shit. So, Dan, I'll get you to go first. What's your good shit for this morning?
Oh, geez. I'm just grateful for the hockey community. People who follow the Ice Garden know that we're kind of going through a little bit of a transition right now where we've kind of lost our funding from SB Nation, Vox Media. They basically said at the end of February, we're not paying for you guys to do work anymore. So that was a little jarring, and we kind of had to scramble and figure things out kind of really fast. And we have a great leader in Mike Murphy, and he was able to kind of stabilize everything. And now he has us about to go the independent route for the at least near future until we really get solidified. But we ran a GoFundMe, and I kind of laughed. I said, he's like, yeah, we're gonna set it for like $1,500. And I was like, man, like nobody's gonna donate any money to us at all. Like, this is crazy. Like, I wouldn't do it. And like within an hour, we had like $8,000 or something like that. And I think we're currently at like I know we passed 12,500 or something. So we thought we were gonna get enough to maybe get us through like a month or two. And we should be good now, at least for the rest of the year. Mike has some really good ideas about the direction that he wants us to go in, just the vision that he has. Really excited about the future. Future Considerations is part of that, the podcast that I'm a co-host of. We haven't done one in a while, and I kind of missed it, but that's something that down the line we're going to definitely revisit. And I'd even like to do more than one, but we'll just settle for just getting the one getting going again, and then we'll work out other things as we go along. But yeah, I guess long story short, that's kind of the good vibes that I've been dealing with lately.
Yeah, that's amazing. Mike is definitely a friend of our pod. He was definitely a very popular episode having him on. A little bit of tears, but I won't say more than that.
I heard that he had cried when he was on here. So
yeah, he hated us. We kept giving him compliments, and he's like, I don't know how to take this. But yeah, we love Mike. That's amazing. That's incredible. The hockey community is absolutely amazing. I love to hear that. Yeah, my good shit is we're just back at it. Spring training. Things are ramping up pretty heavily right now, but it's amazing. I can't really complain. I get to hit fungos on the field. I get to catch in at first base. Like, that's, the dream. So yeah, that's my good shit. And we'll get right into the PHF, into the weeds here. So as we stand right now, the standings are Pride in number 1, then Toronto 6, Minnesota Whitecaps, Connecticut Whale, Montreal Force, Metropolitan Riveters, and then to round it out, the Buffalo Buttes. As far as the standings go, what surprises you from the start of the season, as well as like who is exactly where they should be?
I think just overall, Connecticut is kind of maybe a little surprising that they're only in 4th place. I think coming off of last season, they were a finalist. They've won the regular season last year. It took them to the last game of the season. They beat Toronto, I believe it was, to slot in at 1, and Toronto was number 2. So maybe that's a little surprising. Boston is kind of what we expected. Boston is Boston. Toronto, in a way, has been a little surprising to me. Just overall consistency that they've had. I think there was a game against Montreal, not this past weekend, but 2 weekends ago, where they got shut out, and that might be the only time they didn't score 3 or 4 goals in a game this year, and that's been something where it's, I was a little worried about. Okay, they lost Michaela Grant-Mentis. Where are they going to replace that scoring with? And they've done more than that. They've replaced her, and they've kind of added other weapons, whether it's Brittany Howard, who's had an amazing season, or even Katie Tabin on the blue line. She's been phenomenal, probably one of the candidates for Defender of the Year. So that they've been a little bit of a surprise, just the consistency that they've had. And just, I guess, otherwise, Montreal kind of really, I didn't know what to expect from them, to be honest. Like, I follow women's hockey a lot, but I also follow the NHL. I covered the New Jersey Devils. And so I'm not able to keep track as, these young girls coming up and international hockey and Canadian Division I hockey. Like, it's hard enough for me to kind of keep track of two things, let alone multiple things. So I didn't know a lot about the players on Montreal, aside from a handful of you hear names. I've seen 2 or 3 of them play in person, but I've been really impressed with their toughness, their grittiness. They're definitely a small team, and that's one thing that sticks out. The other teams are a little bit bigger, just size-wise, height-wise, overall, even in goal. And I think that's maybe something that's cost them a little bit here. It's only 7 teams, so you're playing the same teams over and over, and you kind of figure out what works against this one and what doesn't work, and vice versa. They figured some things out here, but they didn't win a lot of regulation games. They have 4 games left. They really need to win out and need a miracle to make the playoffs. But I've been very impressed with them, and I'm curious to see, just like the PHF when it was the NWHL, I was really excited about being a part of it and starting something that was kind of building from the ground up. And I can imagine in Montreal, that's kind of the same feeling that's going on, where the people around the team are probably really excited about, hey, like this is our chance to start something really special and kind of make it our own. And I don't think any of them are on 2-year deals, so it'll be interesting to see this offseason, how that all plays out. I would assume most of them end up coming back, but they've been really fun to watch and kind of surprising. And just unfortunately, I haven't seen them in person because of the schedule and being what it is. They actually come here to New Jersey in not this upcoming weekend, but the following weekend. So that'll be my first chance to see them in person live. And obviously it's the end of the season, so who knows what the games will mean. But I'm just excited to see them in person live and get to interview some of the players as well.
Yeah, definitely. Especially with a first-year program, any information is good information. Like, whatever happens, good, bad, or otherwise, you can always learn from that and move on. Of like, okay, this year we had these types of people. What can we build on for next year? So I'm excited to see kind of how that plays out over the next couple of years within the PHF, especially with the salary cap expanding and more money being available to like go get those big-time athletes, and for them to just focus on hockey. I'm really excited for that. That's kind of how this year has been transformative of now it's a job. Now it's a salary. Like, I can take this money in and I can just put all my time and effort into being a hockey player. So I'm excited for how that changes the league and how, it potentially like grows a little bit from first time teams and then, how they build on their successes. As far as this season looking backwards, are there any notable events that you'd like to recap going into playoff time?
I guess the first Toronto-Boston series, I believe they split those games. And the way that the standings are obviously set up, that those are the 2 top teams, right? So as luck would have it, we get them again in the end of the season, the last weekend of the season. So it may be a little bit of a playoff preview, possibly a championship preview. So those earlier games, they were really impressive that Toronto was able to go into Boston and win a game, because Boston hasn't lost too many games. So to be able to pull that off in Boston was especially impressive. We've had, notable performances here and there on Boston. Lauren Gable is a player that a lot of women's hockey fans, myself included, knew a lot about. You heard her name a lot coming up through college. At Clarkson, she won 2 national titles. always kind of in contention on the fringe of being on Team Canada, and she's just been dynamite to watch. I've said it a couple of times on Twitter, like she is worth the price of admission. The games that I cover here in New Jersey, you can go for free. So people out there, if you live in New Jersey and you're listening to this, go out and go see Lauren Gable this Friday when she comes to New Jersey. Kind of your last chance to see her. She plays with this swagger when she knows she's better than you. Like it's almost over for you. Like she has that confidence, and like I joke around. I said, she gets in these little phases where if she gets the puck, like she wants to clown you, like, and she's gonna try and embarrass you and turn you into like a poster or something, or a highlight reel, or I guess that's what the kids do now is they do these little highlight reels and TikTok reels where it's 5 seconds of her just like embarrassing these other players on the ice, whether it's stick handling or shooting around them or whatever, shooting around the goalie or shooting through the goalie. She's just been really dynamite. So her performance, and you kind of mentioned like the salaries going up, that's already kind of started this past year. And we started to see some of these players come over here that maybe were like, I don't know, the NWHL, the PHF, I'm not too really sure about it. And these last year and a half, 2 years, players have started to say, you know what, like this seems like it's a pretty good gig. The players are making a lot of money now compared to what they used to. Still not where it should be, but we're getting there. And it's been really interesting to watch that growth. And players like Gable and Brittany Howard is another one who comes to mind. She's had a phenomenal season. All the players on Montreal, those kind of like we mentioned, like all those players, they're really good players. And maybe if there wasn't a team in Montreal, they wouldn't have come over here. But now they have this opportunity, and so that's been really, really cool to watch. And then I have to mention Boston's goaltender, Corinne Schroeder.
Absolutely. I was waiting for that. I was like, when are we going to talk about Corinne Schroeder?
She's just like to come into the league, and I think she has 7 shutouts. I should have written it down, but I believe it's 7 shutouts she has as a rookie. And the league all-time record in the whole league, I think, is 7 shutouts in a career. I believe that's Amanda Levier. It might be 7, it might be 8. Regardless, Schroeder has matched that in 14 games that she's played or 15, 16 games that she's played, whatever it is. Like, it's just remarkable. I guess for the people listening that are going to, check out the Ice Garden or whatever we look like, I believe it'll be Ice Garden 2.0 when we relocate. One of the first stories that I'm going to be working on is Boston's going for a three-peat this season, obviously. But to me, the fascinating part that's kind of like been blowing my mind all season is this is the 3rd championship they're going for with the 3rd different starting goaltender. That's just wild. Like they've just been like, we won a championship with that goalie. Like, she's really good, but let's see if we can find another goaltender to do it. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like, what an embarrassment of riches. Like some of these teams, like I cover the Riveters, like they haven't been good for 4 or 5 seasons now. They've just kind of been running in place. And one of the big issues has been finding a goaltender. And they've been able to, this year, possibly find a goaltender. But Boston is just out of this world. And Schroeder is, if she doesn't win Newcomer of the Year, she's definitely going to win Goalie of the Year. And Newcomer of the Year is going to be basically a Rookie of the Year trophy is it could be Gable, it could be Schroeder, it could be Howard. You can go in a million different directions, and they're all probably in the running for MVP too. So
I don't envy the person that has to make those choices. Like, no, thank you, absolutely not.
Yeah, we'll be voting on that at the end of the season.
Yeah,
it's going to be really tough.
Yeah, no, I talk about bursting on the scene. Like, no rookie jitters, no nerves, whatever. Just like, I'm gonna go out and do my thing. Like, every single night, like night in, night out, whatever you throw at her. Like, I'm just so impressed. There was no warm-up period. There was no like, oh, I'm gonna get settled. It was like, boom, like, I'm here and I'm gonna be the best goaltender in this league, and like there's nothing nobody can do or say about it. It was very that of like, I'm here and this is what I do, which I loved. There's nothing really you can say other than like, my jaw's on the floor, like, who is this person, right? So yeah, incredibly impressive.
She's facing a lot of shots too, where it's not like for older hockey fans, like I grew up here covering Martin Brodeur, was one of the best goaltenders in NHL history, and the argument always is, oh, he was great, but he didn't make a lot of saves, right? He had nights where it was 20 saves or 25 saves. Well, he made the saves he had to make at the right times, right? For Schroeder, it's not the same thing. It's like there's a lot of games where Boston they've played the whole season basically with 5D instead of 6. She's facing 45, 50 shots sometimes and 1 goal against, 0 goals against. Like, it's just amazing. And kudos to her. She's had a phenomenal season, and she's going to be tough to beat. And when we get to the playoffs, same thing as it's always been with Boston, but just a different goalie. Just looks a little different.
Yeah, like the same storyline year after year. Rock star goalie, figure it out, basically, right? That's the game plan against Boston. She's super good. Good luck. Like, take advantage of the chances that you have. That scouting report's got to be tough.
Yeah.
I know we've mentioned there's 3 weekends left in the PHF. Are there any matchups to look out for? You've mentioned Boston and Toronto 6 matching up again before playoffs. Anything else you're looking forward to?
There's actually, we mentioned the Boston-Toronto series at the end of the season. That's going to be huge. That's going to probably determine who's first, who's second. Minnesota, we didn't really touch on. They're in a world of hurt. They lost their goalie, Amanda Levier. She's on LTIR. They went from having the most experienced, most decorated goaltender in this league to now having 2 goaltenders who have the least amount of pro experience anyway of any of these 7 teams. Like, even the rookie goalies like Schroeder and like Montreal's goalies, who are considered rookies in this league, these 2 goalies haven't even played as many as them because they haven't played this season. Lev has played the lion's share of games. So Minnesota is really in trouble. They're lucky they are where they are. I'm not a math expert. Mike Murphy, who's been on this show before, he's the math expert. I just do the words. But I believe at this point in time, as we sit with 3 regular season weekends left, that the cutoff is going to be 32 points. So Minnesota's at 32 points right now, and they need to kind of just scheme or crawl or grab and get 1 more point. And I look at their schedule and I don't know if they can do it because they have 2 games against Toronto. Toronto has a lot to play for, right? They're going for this first place thing with Boston. They've been back and forth. Then they have 2 games against Connecticut, I believe. No, then they go to Boston rather.
Boston first. So you go number 2 in the league, then you go number 1 in the league, and you're trying to find a point anywhere.
Right. With 2 goaltenders that have like next to 0 experience. And then your last regular season weekend, you have to play Connecticut, who's the team right behind you, who's fighting for their lives. And you better believe they're looking to win those games. Like, and they have 2 much more experienced goaltenders. So I don't know if Minnesota can do it. I don't know if they can pick up that 1 more point, but I guess at the end of the day, they might not have to because they just need the other teams to not get, like 1 more point. And that, because they can't, like Montreal, the Riveters, Buffalo, even, you could throw in the mix. Like, they all need to win out, and it's not, they're all not going to be able to because they play each other at some point down here. Right. Montreal plays Buffalo, and they come here to play the Riveters. The Riveters play Buffalo. So I think the 4 teams that we have are set. But those games with Minnesota are going to be very key to not only who finishes first and second, but who finishes third and fourth, and who plays. 1 is going to play 4, and 2 is going to play 3. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how that plays out. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, I'm excited to see Montreal come here and play in a week and a half, I guess it is now. Haven't seen them in person. I do know a couple of the girls on the team, so looking forward to seeing them. Brooke Stacy and Autumn McDougall, who played with the Buttes previously, have a little bit of a relationship with them. So I'm looking forward to seeing them and catching up with them and seeing and meeting some new players in Montreal and learning their stories as well.
For sure. Talking about Autumn McDougall and Buffalo. Buffalo has lost 2 big-time players in the middle of the season, kind of unprecedented. What's going on there? They're also at the bottom of the league. So I think there's a lot going on there. But as far as like changing teams mid-season, what kind of things have to go into that?
It's very rare in this league, right? Like in other pro leagues, especially the NHL, like we see guys get waived or sent down to the minors all the time. At this level in this league, like, it's very uncommon. We don't see trades, if at all. We've had the odd maybe 5 or 6 in the first couple of years of the league, but it was always like, it's never going to be like, hey, we're trading you somewhere you don't want to go. And here where I live, New Jersey is pretty close to Connecticut, and Connecticut's pretty close to Boston. So a lot of those players kind of live in the same area. So if you are trading them, it kind of just becomes like, hey, like I live in Connecticut anyway, so
Yeah.
you're able to make it work, right? With them, it's I don't know a lot about the situation other than the players weren't happy with the ice times or the playing times. When your record is what Buffalo's record is, obviously everything's not going great. They've kind of been in this loop where it started after the Lake Placid season where they were like, hey, like, we're tired of being the lovable loser and we want to really change our outlook and perception around the league. And yet they've gone here the last couple of seasons and they've basically had like the same record. It's 4 wins, 5 wins out of 24 games. And the other teams are a little bit above that right now. They've kind of evolved past that, where they've been able to keep some of their same core. That's why you see Boston is very successful. They have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 girls that were on the team last year that won. Same thing with Toronto, Connecticut as well. Minnesota's a little bit of an outlier because they did bring in a lot of girls new to the team, but they all kind of grew up in Minnesota. So if they didn't play with each other in college, it was as mites or in their local high school or whatever. So Minnesota is a big state, but everybody kind of knows everybody, especially in the hockey community. Buffalo's in the spot where they've spent the last 2 seasons kind of rebuilding their team, and you get into the beginning of the season, it's, hi, my name is, and everybody's kind of getting to know each other. And then they go into these seasons and the other teams are a little bit ahead of them and they fall in a little bit of a hole. Whether it's scheduling or not, they've had a little bit of bad luck with that, where they've had some games postponed the last 2 seasons early in the season where it's kind of been hard for them to get in a groove and get moving, kind of find their footing. And before they know it, they're 0-8 or 1-8, and they're already out of it before the season's even, really going before Christmas time, basically. And it's sad to see, the 2 players leaving. I know with McDougal, it was a kind of a battle with the coach where maybe she got benched and wasn't happy with it and just said like, hey, like if you're not going to play me, then just release me. And lucky for her, she's able to find a great landing spot in Montreal. I know it's a little closer to home for her maybe, but she was, the prior 2 seasons, she was their leading scorer. She was their leading goal scorer. So to me, it's a little bit of an odd move where you're like, why are you letting a player like that leave? Like, what did you bring in that is so much better than that? And then I look at your record and I say, well, I don't know. Like,
yeah, not much. Not much.
Yeah, they have, to their credit, they've built a team of really great people, but I don't know that they're a great team. And I don't know that maybe, and it's hard to say again, because they did change the roster so much these last couple of years, but is it coaching? Is it the coaches they just need like a different voice, a different direction? I don't know if that's a move they're willing to make, but looking at it from the outside without having seen them in person in a, I guess like a month or 2 now, I saw them last in Connecticut. Like, they're in most games. They just don't have enough talent to play with the good teams, the Connecticut's and the Bostons and Torontos. Luckily for them, they're done with those games this season. Like they really got their skulls kicked in, whether it was Boston or Toronto. I think they have 2 games left with Connecticut, but they've really struggled at times with scoring, not giving up a lot of goals. They have a lot of games where it's like 8-2, and it's just like it becomes a tough watch. Like I like to watch all these games, as many as I can. The league doesn't always make it as easy as possible because they schedule 2 games at 1 o'clock and 1 game at 2 o'clock. And I've voiced my opinion about that to them before. So hopefully going forward that changes. But, some of their games, it's like, oh my God, it's 6-2. And then there's games where they're winning. There was a game where they were beating Boston. I think it was 2-0 or something like that. And I'm like, I had zero confidence they were going to hold on to that lead. I'm like, this is Boston. Like, are you kidding me? Like, Boston, and sure enough, Boston, like, they chip away. And, Boston can win without playing their best game. Like, it feels like the Buttes have to play like an A+ game every time to win. Like, everybody has to be doing everything well. They can't have any mistakes. And they got a little lucky this weekend, I'll say. And, they have good players on their team, but they played Minnesota this past weekend, and they're without Levier, which we mentioned. She's out for the season, LTIR. playing against a goalie with very little experience, and Minnesota is missing 3 of their top players away with the rivalry series for Team USA. So they were without a whole line of forwards, and it made a difference. And some may argue like, well, they may be top players, but not all of them really contribute all the time. And I get that, but it just the regular flow of how they were doing things just got disrupted with everything. And they had won 6 in a row, and then they lose 4-2 and 1-0 this weekend. So, like we said, Minnesota really needs to kind of scrape and claw here to get some points. But back to the original point about Buffalo, like I just don't know. I would just, if looking from the outside, maybe it's the coaching. You have a lot of talented players on that team that aren't performing up to, and this is the world we live in now where the players are getting paid a little bit more, and we'll start to look at like, hey, this player is making X amount of money, but they aren't performing necessarily as they were last season or what we think they can do. They have a couple players on 2-year deals. They might have the most players on 2-year deals in the league, which isn't a lot, but I want to say maybe they have 3 or 4 of those players, and that'll be interesting to see how they build around them. The second player that left Buffalo, Michaela Boyle, she wasn't really playing. She didn't have any points this season, but still it was a player that you signed early enough in the offseason where it wasn't kind of like one of these late ads where a little confusing, like, why are you letting her go now? Why, like you have 4 games left, 6 games left, whatever it is. Like the team isn't going anywhere. And I guess maybe that's part of it too, where everything now is a tryout for next season.
Yeah. Yeah. You're just looking forward, right? Trying to keep that core and maybe build on something later. It seems like the building has been happening, but they've just been sitting and spinning their tires almost. Starting on the wrong foot, and then it's an uphill battle, and then you're just kind of trying to claw your way back into something that's going to be helpful for you down the road. But yeah, definitely a tough one for them, sitting at the bottom of the league and then losing players kind of mid-season. It's tough, for the rest of the team to kind of pick up the pieces and say, hey, we're getting our skulls kicked in now, like, and now we're losing people. Like, how do we make this a good situation for as many people as possible? So it's tough situation for sure. Everything's always worse when you're losing. You can kind of overlook a lot of things when you're being successful, when you're winning, but when you're losing, everything becomes the end of the world.
And magnified.
Absolutely. Yeah. Magnified to like the 10th degree. But yeah, we've kind of talked about the playoff rundown. If the season ended tomorrow and you had to make your picks for 1, 2, 3, and 4, where would you sit?
It would pretty much be the same. It would be Boston, Toronto, and I would just flip Connecticut and Minnesota, like we said. Like,
okay,
Minnesota is going to be scraping for these last 6 games to get just 8 points. Montreal has an outside chance if they win their remainder games. Same thing with the Riveters, and even if you can believe it, Buffalo. After everything we just said about Buffalo, like mathematically, they would have to win like their remaining 6 games. They would need Minnesota to lose all their games, and they would need to like score a lot of goals because goal differential is one of the they would need to like
just pop off, just absolutely go off.
They would need to be like outscoring like over the next 6 games by like 50 goals or something like that. Like they would really need to change the goal differential, which I'm not saying it's impossible. Anything is. I've seen a lot of crazy crap in this world, especially covering hockey for as long as I have. I've seen losses turn into wins, but I don't even know if they can do that. Like that'd be really, really impressive if they could. But so I think the 4 teams that are 1, 2, 3, 4, they'll be the playoff teams. I'm curious to see how it plays out. I'm gonna try and get to the game, at least one of the games in Boston. But those would be my top 4 teams. They've been the best 4 teams all season, so they deserve it.
Okay, and out of those 4 teams, we talked about Toronto and Boston being kind of like the powerhouses up top, the top 2. Is there a sleeper team in this league that could turn it on and just go light the world on fire?
Connecticut would be that team for me. They got a little experience last season, losing in the final the way that they did to Boston. They really had a bad 5-minute stretch, and the whole game fell apart. Like they were winning 2-1, and all of a sudden it was 3-2, and it was like, oh my God, what just happened? And that kind of tanked their whole experience, I guess. They have the depth. They have the talent on their team. I worry about their goaltending. They added a familiar face to them anyway, Miri Räisänen, who was with them a couple of seasons ago. Great Finnish goaltender. She comes back over. But I just worry about, can they hold up against Boston? Can they hold up against Toronto when you have to try and not give up 5 or 6 goals to maybe win a game? That's where it worries me. But they also have motivation. I believe it's going to be their captain, Shannon Turner's last season. They've kind of already started hinting at that. Shannon's a great friend of mine, and I tease her and I'll say, is this like the last dance? And she's like, oh, I never said I never said I was retiring. That's all you guys. But the team has already started sending out, like they have one home game left and they've already sent out like, hey, come see Shannon Turner's final home game. So that kind of leads me to believe that this truly is going to be her last season. And she deserves to retire whenever she wants. She's been, from day one, she's been in this league as a Canadian player who started out as basically she couldn't make any money here. So she basically played that first season for free. I don't know if a lot of people know that. And she was kind of like one of these practice players and, hey, we might need you on game days. And then, excuse me, every game they did need her. And, 8 years, 9 years later, here we are. And she's just a model citizen, a model person, a model player. She is the Connecticut Whale. I think of the Connecticut Whale. I think of Shannon Turner. I think of Shannon Doyle, but she got married. So now I think of Shannon Turner. So it's a little confusing. But yeah, so, that would be an aspect too with them where, maybe they kind of rally together and say, hey, let's win this for Cap, right? We've seen crazier things happen where the top team doesn't win all the time because there's whether it's somebody that gets hurt or is on their way out or whatever the deal is. And, as a reporter, like that would be the cool story, right? I've written about Boston winning the last 2 years. Like that would be Connecticut's the last founding four team that hasn't won a championship here. And then you have Turner and you have a couple of other older players on that team. You have Marchment and Taylor Gerard, who are two of the best young dynamic players in the league. That wouldn't be so bad to write about as what just happened kind of final. And wherever it is, they haven't announced it yet. I don't even think they know where the final is going to be, but I'd like to be there. But I can't say that because I don't know where it's going to be yet. So if it's going to be out in Arizona or something, like I'm not going to be able to make it out there in time because I haven't had time to plan for it. But we'll see.
Yeah, I think like for me, I'm always keeping tabs on the injuries. It's that time of year, the grind gets extra hard, right? Like you're trying to push through a full season, your body's hurting, like you're asking a lot of it day in, day out. I think that's the biggest thing is just like trying to stay healthy and healthy enough to perform at a very high level, right? Like not just get by, like you're trying to win, you're trying to get into a good position for that. You're trying to, win a championship. So I think the biggest thing for me is I'm just watching to see like who's going to get injured and what's going to change about their team or their dynamic or their line because of their injury. I just think it's super interesting at the end of the year, right? That could change dramatically, right? If knock on wood, your all-star scorer, best player gets injured, how does that then change just even the mindset of your team of like, oh shoot, we have a lot of production to then make up for, or, if it's a goalie, that's a big deal. Like you said with Minnesota, like those things change the dynamics of teams. So just keeping an eye on that and seeing how that changes storylines for down the road.
Yeah. And Toronto is missing Brittany Howard. I think it's the last 2 weekends, upper body injury. I don't like speculating on what's wrong with people. So I'll leave it at that. But they proved they could win without her. They won 3 out of the 4 games they played without her. So that's a good sign for them. Connecticut is kind of in the same boat where Katerina Mrazova got hurt at the All-Star game, unfortunately. And she's kind of been week to week. I believe she might be able to play this upcoming weekend. We'll see. But when they get to the playoffs, they're going to need her. Like they're going to need all hands on deck. And we kind of touched on Boston a little bit. Like they've played the whole season with 5D. Like normal teams like to play with 6D. You can roll 3 pairs of 2 players out. I don't think they're gonna get anyone back or add anybody. I don't think they can anymore. So who they have is who they have, and they've proved so far they can do it. Playoffs might be a little bit different. It is only a best of 3 in the semifinals, but that's where they have to kind of be careful. Is now teams can kind of hone in on them and women's hockey isn't physical, but it's physical. I tell people all the time, like there's not hitting, but there's hitting.
Right.
It can become a physical game, and can Minnesota or Connecticut wear them down and steal a game or two and kind of shock everybody? That's interesting to see, and I want the playoffs to be here already. It's been a really, really long season, but we still have another couple weeks to get through first.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. That's all we have. So see you later. Thank you everyone for listening to this week's episode of More Than 5%. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at More Than 5PCT. Follow Dan on his Twitter, Dan Rice, as well as the Ice Garden for all your women's hockey needs.
Bye.